Welcome to Reddit After Hours. This is r/Trueoffmychest, where OP has a sneaking suspicion that his mom was the one who unalived his dad. Our first post comes from throw_WAWAYD, titled, I found out the real reason why my partner was discharged from the military. My partner always told me that he was discharged from the military due to a medical condition. He said his heart would act up and he'd cough up blood. He would also repeatedly say that there were witnesses to these episodes that he had, probably to make it sound more believable. I never really questioned it, because who am I to question someone's illness? I was honestly just happy that I would see him more. Anyway, he had spun up this whole story about how the stress in the military was just too much for him, and how it made his illness act up. Again, I didn't question it. I just wanted him to be safe and healthy. But fast forward nearly 10 years, and I finally see his documents. I was organizing and decluttering when I stumbled across them in a folder. I skimmed through them just to see what pile I should put them in, when I see there was his discharge documents. Just scanning the first page made me cold. He, in fact, was not medically discharged. I couldn't help myself at this point, and I read through the packet. Violation after violation. Lying to officers, not following orders, going missing for hours, failing certain tests, having a room so filthy that it was a health concern, which has been quite the experience to live with on my end. The list goes on. The officers share their accounts of everything. There was proof of every violation in the packet. I cried when I read through it all. He lied to me about so much, and I believed it all. He painted himself as this highly intelligent, capable, dependable, charming person. I felt like such a damn idiot. Even his mother told me he wasn't ready for the real world when he was initially discharged. I wish I believed her over him. Why would he lie to me about this? Why not just tell me the truth? It's deeply upsetting. We always said that we appreciated honesty, but maybe this was only a one-way thing. He still doesn't know that I know the truth. I'm not sure if I should tell him. I know what his response will be. Deny and gaslight, or get upset at me for violating his privacy. He always gets upset at me for violating his privacy when I discover his affairs. OP, one of the hardest lessons I had to learn when I joined the military was that just because they're in the military doesn't make them a hero and doesn't mean that they're actually a good person. I've met a ton of soldiers that were just awful people. If I were you, I would absolutely run from the hills and never look back. Our next Reddit post comes from Inevitable Tier 6359, titled, I only have a few weeks left to live, and my partner makes me feel like it's my fault. I don't even know where to start. I found out 2 months ago that I have terminal cancer. The doctors told me I might have a few months, but now it looks like I have more like a few weeks. I'm only 29, and I never thought my life would end like this. When I first got the diagnosis, I thought my boyfriend would be there for me. We've been together for 4 years, and even though our relationship hasn't been perfect, I believed he loved me. But as the days have passed, I'm realizing just how wrong I was. He acts like my illness is a burden on him. At first, he was supportive. He came to the hospital, told me we'd get through this together, but that didn't last long. Now he snaps at me for needing help or being too tired to do things around the house. If I don't cook dinner or clean up, he says things like, you can't just give up on life because you're sick. A few nights ago, I asked if he could sit with me for a while I tried to sleep because I've been having panic attacks at night. He rolled his eyes and said, do you know how exhausting it is to deal with this every single day? You're not the only one who's suffering. Yo, what am I even reading? This has to be the most insensitive guy on the face of the earth. I feel like I'm trapped. My energy is gone. My body is giving out, and the one person I thought I could count on is making me feel like I don't even deserve comfort in my final days. I want to leave, but where would I go? I don't have the strength to fight this anymore, and the thought of dying in hospice surrounded by strangers is terrifying. What hurts the most is that he doesn't even seem to care. When I cry, he walks away. When I try to talk about my fears, he shuts me down with comments like, I don't know what you want me to say. It's not like I can fix this. It's like he's already checked out. waiting for me to be gone so he doesn't have to deal with me anymore. OP, I'm so sorry for everything that you're going through. No one deserves to be treated how you're being treated right now. I hope in the end you find peace. Our next Reddit post comes from Primary Remote 5203, titled, I had a late-term pregnancy loss. My grandpa passed away, and he personally requested my son to be in his obituary. About a year and a half ago, my husband and I were pregnant with our first little boy. We unfortunately lost him late into the pregnancy. My grandpa passed away last week. We didn't see each other much. I'm talking like maybe 3 times ever, solely because we live on opposite ends of the country, but we sent each other cards for holidays every single year, and somehow we just built a special bond regardless of the physical distance. My mother called me yesterday afternoon, and when I picked up, she asked me if this was a good time to speak, because she had something sensitive that she wanted to discuss. She told me she was working on my grandpa's obituary and about who she was listing as survived by and preceded in by death, and she told me that my grandpa had requested, before he passed, to have my son listed under the latter. She told me that my grandpa loved him and talked about him with joy, even still, and was still so proud of him. And she called back to ask my permission to follow through with this request. I, of course, said yes, and I've been sobbing ever since. Over the past year and a half since we lost our son, it seems like everyone has forgotten about him, or they don't want to talk about him because it feels awkward. I haven't even heard one family member speak his beautiful name aside from my mother, and it hurts to feel like your child, your only child, is forgettable and makes others feel uncomfortable. But not my grandpa. He was telling everyone up until his passing about his great-grandson and how proud of him he was, to the point that he personally requested him to be included by name in his own obituary, his name that no one else even wants to speak. I've been feeling so many layers of grief after that phone call. I miss my son, and I miss my grandpa. I don't necessarily believe in the afterlife, but I'd like to think that they finally got to meet and are together somewhere, and that thought brings me so much joy. But the other side of the sword is there is now one less person on this earth who remembers him too, and one less person who cares. But then there's this whole other layer of feeling overwhelming of love and appreciation too. I can't describe it, other than it feels like my grandpa is continuing to do through his death what he did through his life. I almost feel like his request to include my son was him reminding me after his death that he's still there and that they're still looking out for me and for us. That was incredibly sweet of your grandpa, OP. I have one kid myself, and I can't imagine what it would be like to lose one. But your grandpa sounds like a really special person. I'm sorry for both your losses, OP. Our next Reddit post comes from Asleep Raccoon 5331, titled, A Year Into My Marriage and I'm Done. I, a female 29, have been married to my husband, a male 30, for a year, and honestly, I'm at my wit's end. For the last 5 to 6 months, we've been stuck in this repetitive cycle, and it all revolves around our passionate hugging life, or rather, the lack thereof because of him. When we first got together, our passionate hugging life was amazing. Even after we got married, things were good for a while, but now it seems like adult videos have completely taken over. He outright chooses it over being with me. He's told me it's not about me or attraction, but that he craves it. If I let him do his thing, he'd be up for adult passionate hugging later. But why should I wait around for him to finish watching his adult videos just to be intimate with my own husband? Then came the bigger red flags. He left our house at 2 a.m. claiming to get food, only for me to find out later he was in a high school parking lot. Yes, you read that right, jerking off. Another time I tried to initiate passionate hugging and he turned me down because he wasn't feeling it. I respected his choice, of course. But later that same night, when I was in bed, he stayed on the couch in our bedroom under a blanket, secretly watching adult videos because he missed it. The next day, when I tried to talk to him about it, he admitted that's exactly what he was doing. It's gotten to the point where I feel like I'm competing with a screen. He even says stuff like, adult videos are part of me, it's who I am, as if it's some personality trait. I'm high libido, so this really bothers me. I've tried everything, initiating, communicating. He even tried to spice things up by trying new things and even suggested couples therapy, but he flat out refuses to go. At this point, I don't even recognize him. I still love him, but when I look at him now, I feel nothing. I'm trying not to lose respect for him, but it's so hard when this is what I've been dealing with. I feel like I'm mourning the man I married and questioning why adult video addiction is being normalized. Does anyone have any advice? Has anyone been through this? Is it even worth trying to salvage, or am I fighting a losing battle here? OP, I almost feel like you kind of are fighting a losing battle. He definitely needs help. He definitely needs therapy, but if he's not willing to change or willing to acknowledge the problem, then I think you're fighting a battle that you can't win. You can't win a battle for him that he doesn't want to win for himself. Our next Reddit post comes from non-IK name titled, I think my mom unalived my dad. When I was 6 years old, my family owned 2 restaurants. One Saturday night, my dad was alone in one of the restaurants and there was some sort of gas leak, so the restaurant ended up blowing up. My dad survived, but his body was badly covered in burns. He had multiple skin grafts, was put in a medically induced coma, and when he left the hospital, he became addicted to various pain meds. When I was 12 years old, my father had a seizure while I was home alone, and my school therapist told my mom that she had to kick him out or my therapist was going to file a report with DCFS. Now, here's where things get complicated. I used to believe one thing growing up, and this past Tuesday, I found out a ton of information that completely shook me. Here's my experience growing up. My parents' divorce was tumultuous, to say the least. We lived with my mom and hated my dad because he was an addict. He stole all of our family photos, even my elementary school yearbook that has a picture of my aunt as a baby instead of me. He was ruining our lives. He took all of our money. We used to live comfortably, but now our house was getting foreclosed and we couldn't even afford food or clothes. He would constantly break into our house. He only wanted to see us to spite my mother, and honestly, I hated him. He finally died of an overdose while I was in 8th grade, and we were all so relieved. It was like a weight had finally been lifted off of all of our shoulders. Here's what I found out from the court documents. A few months after divorcing my mother, my father was actually clean and sober. He was doing everything he could to simply have contact with us. My mother filed many false police reports on him and was held in contempt of court at least 4 times. We didn't have any money because of my mom. Basically, she was supposed to buy my dad out of the restaurant and our home. One of the restaurants was valued at over $1 million. So instead of buying him out or selling it and splitting the profits, she decided to tank the value of the properties. She took out loans, stopped paying vendors, ordered a bunch of extra food to throw out. She also stopped paying the mortgage on our home, which was almost paid off, so it got foreclosed on. At one point, DCFS had investigated my mom's and my dad's home and found that my mom's home was unfit and unsafe for living because we didn't have fire or CO2 detectors. That day, my mom went to the police station to file a false police report stating that my father had broken into our house to steal them. By the time Dad died, we were already under the guardianship of juvenile lawyers, and she was about to lose custody of us. So, on to why I think she unalived him. While they were married, my mother enabled my father's addiction. She stole a prescription pad from a doctor's hotel room, snuck drugs into rehab through my sister, and sometimes supplied him with more pills. After they separated, my father was able to kick his addiction and stay clean throughout. She was about to lose custody over us. Suddenly, he relapses. He gets clean in rehab, but dies of an overdose at sober living. After his death, she was positive there was going to be an investigation. She convinced me and my sibling that my dad's family had unalived him. When I was 20, she asked me to get a copy of his death certificate, but I wasn't interested, so I never did. My mom had my older sister help her forge a will and claimed that the will that his family had was a forgery. Unsurprisingly, the courts ruled that my mom's was a forgery. Oh, and also, the photo albums that disappeared, they were, quote, found after his death, which was only a few months later. There's so much more, but all of this is just swirling in my head, and I can't make sense of it all. I just requested a copy of his death certificate today, and I'm going to talk to the sober living house to see if she ever visited him. He unfortunately died over 14 years ago, so I can't be sure that he'll remember, but I'm going to try to find out. Edit, a couple of days ago before he died, my mom had mentioned speaking to the director of the sober living program. OP, not trying to add fuel to the fire, but all of that is incredibly suspicious. If I were you and if I were in your shoes, I would absolutely be digging for the truth, and I would really, really be suspicious of your mother. That was Reddit After Hours, bringing you r/Trueoffmychest. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe as we put out new Reddit videos almost every single day. And to everyone that's already subscribed, thank you so much for your support. We can't thank you enough.